a content creator is really weird. It affords me the opportunity to spend in mobile games to then go and make content based off of the stuff that I've spent money on. And that means that I have spent almost $150,000 combined over my entire time playing Call of Dragons and Rise of Kingdoms, which again feels just really crazy to say out loud. So stick around in this video for the breakdown of exactly how much I've spent and also what I got for the money. Was it worth it? Man, I'll let you be the judge. Let's get this video started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and for those of you that are seeing my channel for the first time, I'm a mobile gaming content creator for games that are pay to win. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to win, but it does mean that you can spend a lot of money to get a lot of advantage. And I play primarily city building war games where the advantage you're getting comes in many forms. It's troops and resources that are lost permanently, speed ups, which are lost permanently as well when you fight other players. And also there are things like equipment, commanders, and armaments that stick with your account forever. So in this video, I'm going to do the following things. I'm going to break down my spend year over year, and we'll talk a little bit about how I arrived at those numbers, because it's a little bit more complicated this year than it has been in previous years. I'll explain why. And I'll give you a tour of what I've got in this account. What did I get for all that money spent? And I mean, look, I'm having a great time playing this game, but that is a lot of money. So before we go too far into this video, let me just remind you that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice, but you should seriously consider your life priorities when you're spending in mobile games. Whether that's Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons or really any game, consider saving for retirement. Importantly, having an emergency fund, prioritizing your family. There are a number of things that, in my eyes, take a priority over spending in mobile games, and only after those things are locked up do I then go and spend in mobile games. And it's weird, as I said in the intro in this video, being a content creator, because for me, the calculus is definitely very different for do I spend or not. When I go and I max a commander like Trajan, I can tell you all about how they work. And a lot of people have a lot of misconceptions about the value of this commander. In fact, only by using it can I show you, hey, a lot of people are wrong about whether or not he's good. So the point that I'm trying to make is that my situation is definitely weird. Consider your situation before you spend in mobile games. And let's get to the breakdown of my spending. Now, it was a little bit tricky this year to figure out how much have I spent in Rise of Kingdoms and in Call of Dragons, because there's something that makes it a little bit more difficult to figure that out. If I make my way over to my items, you can see here that these Flux scripts in Rise of Kingdoms, they're called dragon tickets in Call of Dragons. They make it so that you can basically pre-purchase bundles of an exact amount, and then you just use your ticket to go and claim the bundle. So this is weird for a number of reasons. First of all, it makes it a little bit more tricky to figure out where have I spent my money, like what did I spend it on in game? And also, it makes it a little bit tricky because, you know, previously I would track all of my spending by just doing it all on one credit card. So to get a report of like, what did I spend on mobile games is like easy. I go to that credit card and I look at the spending pattern of that card specifically, which is only ever used for mobile games. Well, now it's just a little bit different because I'm using a different card to go and purchase these. Without getting into all that complication, I will say this. If you are making purchases in game at the time of this recording, and this is not a sponsored video, but at the time of this recording, using these Flux scripts and dragon tickets is the jam. You get about 10% more in-game stuff. That's not exactly the right way to say it, but you know, if I spend $100, I'll get in the Pluto Mall, which is where you get these. I'll have a card in the end screen. I've covered this extensively, but I'll get a ticket for $100, which is what I spent, and a ticket for $10. So 10% more stuff is approximately what you get when you use Pluto Mall. It explains that in the mall. I explained that in a separate video. But that is a nice pickup, by the way, for saving, and that's both in Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons, all right? So this makes my reporting a little bit tricky. Historically, I've gone in and I will make a pie chart showing here's where I spent on speed ups, here's where I spent on equipment, here's where I spent on passports, here's where I spent on raw gems, etc. That's not a report I can very easily generate anymore because that level of breakdown is no longer available. The other thing that I want to point out is that there's a way for you to see how much you've spent in game. And there's a link. I'll include it in the description. It's also available in the client, which is how I figured this out, for Call of Dragons, which is the sort of VIP center for Lilith Games. And I don't want to show it because there's like a lot of personal information that's in there. But what I'll simply do is show a couple screenshots to illustrate like and sort of prove. Like nobody said prove it to me before for how much I've spent, which is kind of funny. But this will show you the in-game spend that I've done. You basically take the number for your points, remove some of the zeros, and you've got like the thousands of dollars that you've spent in the game, probably. Some of the points I think you get other ways, but it's a pretty accurate number, maybe overestimating the amount that you've spent. And so when I went and I did the math based off of my credit card history, my estimate is that I've spent a grand total of about $122,000 in Rise of Kingdoms, $27,300 in Call of Dragons. And by the way, Call of Dragons is new. Like it came out this year, which is why the spend is so high. I rushed tier 5 troops. For those not as familiar with this style of game, tier 5 troops are the highest tier of troop. And, you know, I mean, you either have them or you don't. And if you don't, you're losing to the people that have them. So I went in and I picked those up within about a month since the game went live. I picked up those tier 5 troops and it was expensive. I think that ran me about $15,000. So my general spending plan for Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons is that I can play pretty much all of the events and showcase them for about $2,000 a month, sometimes more, sometimes less. In fact, at the start of this year, I spent way less, which was pretty surprising to me. I was spending way, way less. So I'll put up on the screen my combined Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons spend. And it's actually kind of crazy that like at the start of the year, January, February, I was not buying much in Rise of Kingdoms. And then when Call of Dragons landed in March and then April and May, when I was rushing tier 5s, I mean, you can see the additional expense there is super freaking real. Yeah, super real. And then I start to mellow out in June, July, August, September, October. And I have to combine the data from like the Pluto Mall stuff, which maybe I'll do. Maybe I'll just include that. So the point that I'm trying to make is that when you actually look year over year, funny enough, my Rise of Kingdoms spending has actually gone way down. By the end of this year, I'll probably have spent, I would guess, $23,000 in Rise of Kingdoms. And compared to last year's $28,000 or the year before $31,000, it's actually surprising how much less that I'm spending. And the thing that was sort of interesting as I look at this data is I realized the value of being in a one alliance kingdom in a stacked alliance is actually really, really quite significant to me. So let me explain that. About 50% of my spending in the past, if you can believe it, was on speed ups, but now I'm opening so many gold chests being in a whaled alliance that like I don't need to buy as many speed ups anymore. Like it's actually crazy like how many speed ups I'm getting from bundles, and I don't need to spend on those anymore because like I have plenty of speed ups. I don't really need to train a ton more troops unless there's like an event. And like, bro, I'm out, you know, I'm in KVK now, but I'm about to get half my troops back. I'll be around 160 million power with my troop return. Like, I don't know, I got enough troops and I got a ton of speed ups, man, that I still need to spend. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that the spending that I was doing on speed ups almost entirely vanished. I mean, every other week I was buying Call of the Ancients. I'm not buying that anymore. I don't need it. I was buying equipment related stuff. I'm not doing that anymore. So the weirdness is that like the only thing I was spending on pretty much all year was like armaments. That's basically the only thing I spent on all year long, and all my other spending reduced. And a part of what I sort of, you know, am buying to is managing a gem count to go in and then, you know, spend the gems on the events that I want to spend on. So you can kind of understand like if my spending is representative of what other big whales are spending, you can see why the developers would want to release a sort of new tiering system for equipment to revitalize the equipment system. Because, like, I'm basically done with equipment until, you know, a couple days from now when they go and release iconic tiers for equipment, right? So, yeah, that's certainly going to impact how much I spend. Now, all of a sudden, I need materials again. Now, all of a sudden, I need patterns again. So that's something I will certainly be hunting for. All in all, I'm actually very happy to see my Rise of Kingdoms spending go down. I mean, the amount I was spending is actually, like, kind of shocking. $32,000 in a single year for Rise of Kingdoms. Wow. Look, I try to aim for like $2,000 a month to play the events, have the stuff, and be a, you know, rally account. But rallying is kind of in a weird space. So was garrisoning with the release of the armament system. It really, really added an incredible amount of, how do we say this, diversity to what any one player has. Like, before, individual players were not very differentiated in this game. Like, you either had the rally commanders or you didn't. You either had the VIP or you didn't, and that was it. That was the whole thing. Then they added equipment, but like, people got to the same end state for rallying and garrisoning for equipment by just focusing. And so you were differentiated for a little bit, but then not very long. But now with the armaments, man, it is just super differentiated, and you can't just like easily make it up. Like the difference between what players have. Like, the inscriptions are incredibly, shockingly difficult to obtain. You have almost no control over which ones are where anyways. So like, it's just, you know, are you the meta rally lead or garrison in your kingdom depends on how lucky you get with randomness, which is, and you know, how much money you commit to the process of randomness, to, you know, you see what you get. And like, if you get crazy double inscriptions or crazy armaments, like, you're in a good spot. If you get lucky with transmutations, you're in a good spot. If you don't, get wrecked, and that's your situation. My estimate for what it takes to be like an insanely top tier rally or garrison in this game right now is somewhere in the realm of like $20,000 on armaments. And I'm basing that off of like what I've seen Yoda 808 and others do. He's sort of the strongest player by power in the game. Sort of the strongest player by power. I mean, it depends on what his power is going to be when he gets his troops back. I can show you Yoda 808 currently at 779 million power, started this KVK at like 1.4 billion power. So I guess all that to say, as of the beginning of December in 2023, I'm at about $122,000 spent in Rise of Kingdoms. I expect by the end of the year, that'll be in the realm of $123,000 total, or $124,000 for my entire time playing Rock, which means that it's time for me to show you what I actually got. And a part of what I can show you is my stats. I've got about 20 billion kill points, almost. And I've also pulled down a large number of dead troops here, almost 85 million dead troops, almost entirely tier 5s. So this is significant because I've got 850 million power and dead troops lost forever in glorious combat, right? You look at an account, you see its power, and a part of what you want to know is, what's the dead troop count? My highest power is 216 million. I've seen 414,000 glorious victories and only 2,729 defeats, which is actually kind of surprising. But these days, I used to like very intelligently retreat my armies when they're getting super low to avoid bad trades, but I just don't have the patience for that anymore, I find. It feels very tedious to me, and I just don't have time for the tedium. It's just, I don't know. I used to be really interested in that, and now I'm just not. In terms of commanders, I've got pretty much every commander maxed. CJ is not, but he's really close. I might just spin the wheel a little bit, get the remaining 76 sculptures to max him, but like, I don't need to. Chandragupta is not maxed. There's really no reason to max him at this point. I've got plenty of skills on him for auxiliary skills. Henry's not maxed. Solid commander. I somewhat regret not putting sculptures into him early, quite frankly. If there's any one commander regret where I'm like, I should have put into him early, I think Henry's probably it. Wu Zetian, kind of chilling at the moment. 5521. We've got Soliman, not really going to work on him. Got first place in a Mightiest Governor. Turns out he's absolute total garbage, which is really weird that was never addressed, but like, that's just the case with commanders in this game sometimes. Like, sometimes they roll out and they just flop. They completely flop. And that's either the players never figured out how to make them work, or there just isn't a way to make them work. So Suleiman is one of those commanders. Margaret and Bobber, I have no intention of working on. The ranged commanders is not a playstyle I'm very interested in. Bertrand is, just not really meta, so I have not maxed him. Pyrrhus, I could put a bunch of skills into him. I haven't yet. I'm waiting to see where I'll put those auxiliary skills for a KVK that would reward me for auxiliary skills. Lubu is not maxed. And actually, there's a lot of recent commanders I've not maxed. Jan Zizka, Dido, and Justinian I have not maxed. I do plan to work on some of these, particularly Dido is one that I think I do want to have in my arsenal. She's really, really good for garrisoning, specifically passes. And also forts. She's pretty good. So I guess that puts us at 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. You could call it maybe 14 commanders I've not maxed, which is actually kind of more than I thought, but also kind of unimportant. I mean, I'm not going to use them anytime soon. In terms of the number of sculptures I have on hand, 1,444, just in time for the Ashurbanipal Hermann Prime meta to show up. And I am pretty hyped for that meta. I mean, I think the poison is going to be really fun. In terms of equipment, I have 2 infantry sets, 2 archer sets, 2 cavalry sets, and a leadership set that is the fattest question mark of my life. Look, I've played games where they really ensure that you're rewarded for the investments that you make. And if they change the relevance of those investments, they give you opportunities to swap for free to something else. So we'll see if we continue to get open field leadership commanders. I hope that we will. If we do, then this is probably what I have here. If we don't, then it's going to be really awkward for me, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do. I've talked about that more than enough. The infantry sets that I have, I use typically the 6-piece bonus, not shown here because I've got a canyon lineup. And also I have sort of here's the 6-piece bonus, right? Looking really solid. I also instead have the fully meta garrison stuff with the crit hammer over here, KVK helmet. You use the Hope Cloak, Eternal Night, and also the 2-piece bonus. By the way, we don't know if this is still going to be meta as of the time of this recording. Depending on how the iconic tiers work, we don't know if the infantry set is going to have the same iconic tier bonuses as the Hope Cloak, and this could change what's meta. So we'll see. In terms of Cav stuff, I focus pretty heavily on the 2-piece bonus for Cavs. We use the chest piece and the boots, always Ash the Dawn and Navarre's Control for the boosted health. I have the KVK helmet, and the KVK sword is crit. My second best set would look like this. It, instead of the KVK stuff, brings in 2 more of the set pieces for the 4-piece bonus, maintaining that Ash of the Dawn and Navarre's Control situation. I showed, I think earlier in the video, I used the 6-piece archer set. I also have this set, which is the 4-piece archer set bonus with the KVK weapon and helmet. And in terms of what accessories I have overall, I have been saying for years that really the priority should be to go in and try to get 5 of the horns, 7 of the rings, and I'm pretty much there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rings. 2 are crit. I do now have a Greatest Glory, so I don't know if I'll go and make 7 rings at this point. I made this due to the new Smite meta from Liu Cha. I've got this Pendant of Eternal Night, which I made ages ago, and is one of my, I don't want to call it a regret, because it was good at the time, but it was not great at the time. But this is not a great accessory. I feel like no one should ever make this, Pendant of Eternal Night. Here are my horns, as I mentioned, 5 of them. 2 of them are crit. And then Dagger and Web are kind of the jam. I like these debuffs a lot. If I were ditching one of these, I'd say probably the Web is the one I would consider getting rid of. The health reduction on the Dagger, I think, is certainly worth keeping. And I have a stinking lucky coin, which is better than it used to be. It's always been really good in Arc, where, garrisons get swarmed, you just want to live. But now that we have weird Constantine shield synergy, especially with Liu Chet and well, I guess it's really Gorgo and Constantine in the garrison, I'm getting renewed use from my Skolas' Lucky Coin, which is really what I think the game design ought to do all the time. The game design should make irrelevant commanders relevant, irrelevant equipment relevant, so that people who invested in them, because, you know, the game showed us a thing to work on, at some point get rewarded for having done so, right? As opposed to, you know, the Soliman situation. So from here, I can show you the city themes that I've won. And I have a fair amount of them as far as 10% and now 15% city themes go. If we get a quick look at that, I do wish there was a way to filter by legendary, but I don't think there is. The first legendary city theme that I got was the Age of Devotion. If you would believe this, I mean, the amount of power gain I had to get for this was so low. I think it was like 20 million power gain for like the best theme in the game at this point. These days, you'd expect somewhere around, you know, in a meta kingdom, 40 to 80 million power as a requirement to get a city theme like this. I do have the KVK Cavalry city theme. I got a 5% skill damage city theme, but I'm an infantry player, so this city theme actually sucks for me, which is really tragic. At least it has AP recovery, so there is that slight upside. I do have this KVK city theme as well, Flight of the Heron, 10% archer attack. I don't use that, however, I do have better. As we proceed through here, I have the Dynastic Conqueror. This is my favorite city theme. 8% troop defense is amazing. I don't know why they put commander experience gain on here. It seems shockingly irrelevant. And the minus 10% cav attack is really not that bad in the grand scheme of things. I've also got the Spire of Wadjet. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is an Ark of Osiris city theme for a top 4 placement. And I've also got Battle's Bloom, the 15% cavalry health theme, as well as a 15% archer defense theme. So if I get back to rallying and garrisoning for archers or cavalry, I will be in a pretty good spot with either of those themes being in my arsenal, which is super worth. The thing that's just really weird is that now with the new iconic equipment system coming in, it's just going to be a really, really long time before I can consider actually being remotely meta for rallying or garrisoning for those troop types. I mean, the game, unless you are spending an astronomical amount, remember, I've spent $123,000 in Rise of Kingdoms. Unless you are spending an astronomical amount, you're really not positioned to do more than one troop type for your rally or your garrison. You got to pick. Once that iconic equipment lands, it's after maybe a year or two, maybe more, you might be positioned, but even then, you'll still almost certainly be secondary to someone who's got, instead of the, you know, set pieces that are crit and iconic level 5, you know, you have to have the KVK stuff. And anyways, all that to say, focus on a troop type. Good plan to focus on a troop type. I do have several pretty decent sets of armaments at this point. For my wedge formation, I've got all of my pieces with inscriptions now. We're looking at 8.5% attack, 11.2 defense, 9.5 health, with 0.6 all damage, hunter, guarded, respite, spiked, and infamy, so 5 inscriptions. All my archers, my best set for wedge, is robust, cohesive, deflector, enduring, and actually one of these has no inscriptions. It's just an amazing armament. So this set is like very much able to get improved once I get a good inscription to drop in there. And it's got, 9.7 attack, 10.6 defense, 6.6 health, and 2% all damage, which is pretty good. And then the final set I can show you is my Cav set. My Cav set is Enraged Onslaught, Assertive Watchman. I am missing an inscription over here, so hopefully that's something I'll be able to do at some point. And this is really not a set I've invested transmutation into. The only one I've spent all my transmutation stones on is infantry, which is why my infantry stats look really good. And I've got 6.7, 6.9, 6.3 for attack, defense, and health, and then 1.5 all damage. I definitely could have more total stats over here if I did not spend a ton of my transmutation stones looking to make my infantry stuff my best stuff. So here is my arch set, which is deceptively good. It's got 7.3 attack, 6 defense, 9.8 health. And you'd be like, that's deceptively good. But what I have is this double inscription where I get a shield periodically, and that has crazy Constantine synergy. So I've got Phalanx, Ward, Guarded, Sentries, and Hardy as my options here. And I got absolutely raffle stomped on transmutations. I spent like 9 transmutations, spending 5 stones a pop, trying to reroll this defense to an infantry stat, and I failed. I spent like 35 stones trying to roll off this archer attack for an infantry stat, and I failed. I got dunked. I got decimated on my armaments over here, truly. But it is what it is. That's the Gamba. So that's my account. It's in a pretty good spot. I'm set to be, an infantry rallying garrison, primarily for going with the hunter, inscription over here on Wedge, but I can sort of do arch as well and kind of get away with it for now. At some point, however, very soon, we're going to be getting rare inscriptions, and the game changes all over again, baby. So we'll see what I want to do. Thankfully, because I'm in Kingdom 2605 with this main account, there's so many whaled accounts here, like super whaled accounts, that I don't have to focus as much as being a rally or a garrison. And by the way, we have a few spots open. So if you do want to consider joining us, we were 20 billion power when we started this KVK. We're at 14 billion now. And again, it was 20 billion power with 54 members, which is like kind of crazy. And being in this alliance, in a one alliance kingdom, we're not Imperium, so people can migrate anytime. We don't have to delete our troops like many Imperiums do. We don't have to fill our hospitals at the end of the KVK to try to eke people in for a migration that can only last for a day to get people in, right? Like, there's a lot of advantages to this situation. One of the best advantages is that you get all these stinking gold chests so that your spending allocation can change off of speed ups and into other stuff, which like now's a really good time for that. So if you want to join our kingdom and you have just a stupid amount of kill points and dead troops, burnruz.com is where you can apply. This kingdom is extremely selective in who can join and has an extremely high standard for participation. But like, yeah, if you like to fight, this is kind of a crazy and amazing kingdom to be in. Now, the other thing I'll point out is that for the $123,000 I've spent, I would guess that in the realm of like $3 to $5 grand is what I've spent on my restart account. So I have a second account in here, actually, and it's really pretty good. I can only use 5 marches in KVK. That's all I have, the armaments and inscriptions, and maybe not the inscriptions, the armaments and the equipment to support. But it's also a 2 infantry, 1 leadership, 1 cav, 1 archer setup. And the gear's like pretty damn good considering this is my restart. Like, I know a bunch of people are going to be like, yeah, well, you spent a bunch of money on it, but like not like my main. And like, I don't have the crits that my main has, but that's the primary difference. I'll have to figure out what the heck I'm doing with this leadership gear. It's a very awkward situation. Leadership's just in such a funky place. But this account's great. Sitting at 91 million power. If I look at my stats here, I've got only 16 million dead troops. At least it's pretty much all tier 5s. But this account, like that's the main difference between this account and the main is the equipment's not as good, the armaments aren't as good, and like there's a difference of over 700 million power worth of dead troops. GG. Wow. That is crazy. Only 4.5 billion kill points on this account, which like for what it's worth, this account with its stats would not be sufficient to join the kingdom where my main account is. Like, you really need to be in that like 8 billion kill points plus range, I think, to kind of be at the starting line, unless you have a younger account, and that's kind of a different matter entirely. I also have a farm account, which is really quite stacked. It has a stupid amount of speed ups that I'm trying to just not spend because I don't want the account to be an Imperium burden. So it currently impacts our matchmaking, and, you know, that's not good. But what I do to kind of offset that a little bit is I try to kill all the troops on the account, pretty much every KVK that I can. So this KVK, I had 4 million dead tier 4s on my farm. I want to say I started the KVK around 80 million power. I think that sounds right. And I have 4.3 million dead tier 4 troops. So just try to get rid of as many of those as I can. And I still have a few troops left, but I think you kind of get the idea here. The account, as I mentioned, has just a stupid amount of speed ups. And I don't spend them because I don't want to have Imperium burden. I could do tier 5 troops on this account, but it would just add to the power. And it would also cost gold that I can't afford in order to train them. So all these speed ups. Like this could become an insane main account. And I did the absolutely ridiculous thing of maxing the ranged commanders and working on the ranged equipment, thinking that what I would do is just, while I'm playing my main, I'd position this farm somewhere and set up the ranged towers. Bro, nah, ain't nobody got time for that crap. It's so much micro. Bruh, it is not happening. So I actually have really good ranged equipment here, and it just sits on the bench, which is pretty tragic, but that's just the reality, man. Now, as far as my Call of Dragons account goes, I'm at 106 million power. You don't really get a lot of dead troops in this game, so that's not really something, I mean, I could show you, but the whole point of this game is that you don't have troops die, which seems, I don't know, like a pretty cool paradigm to me. But this game is definitively, I would say, according to App Store ranking and Google Trends, less popular than Rise of Kingdoms, which is in many ways surprising to me because the combat is so good. But I think the biggest gap that this game has is that it's a war game that didn't prioritize communities, whereas Rise of Kingdoms is a community game that has war. And like that difference is everything. That's my suspicion as to why this game does not do as well. I've covered that extensively in other videos, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 legendary heroes maxed. I could max another 2 on the spot. And the accounts, I mean, a lot of troops, a lot of really good artifacts. I've spent, as I mentioned, like, I think it's like in the realm of $27,000 on Call of Dragons. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I mean, at least 10 fully maxed artifacts, and there are more that I could max on the spot if that's really what I wanted to do. So this account's in a great spot. And instead of having equipment, this game has the combination of artifacts plus pets. My pets are pretty good, but pets are kind of in a weird situation in this game, because, like, you can't actually choose where your skills go. It's, like, full random gamba, which makes me less inclined to, like, really go nuts on pets, just because there's just too little control over what's going to be the outcome of the, you know, investment into a pet. But, yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of really great legendary pets that I'm very happy with and always working on more. I like the pet system generally, with the exception of the full gamba on the skill deployment. So there you have it. $150,000 of mobile gaming value. So the value thing is the interesting question mark. Like, is it value? You can do a lot with $150,000, but I've also had a lot of experiences that I really enjoyed over the last 5 years making content and also playing these games. And I would say, certainly as a content creator, I would say that I have no regrets about the amount of money that I've spent. Weirdness about the amount of money that I've spent. Yeah, I do feel a little weird at times when we look at that big end number, but also, like, you know, for me as a content creator, it's just the cost of doing business. And if a new content creator were to try to emulate that and start by spending and then making videos, that's dumb. Don't do that. Don't do that. I mean, I spent a lot of time making sure I really enjoyed the games, making sure I really enjoyed content creation before I started spending like I do. So keep that in mind. This video is long enough. If you want to see last year's video where I talk about how, look at me, I broke $100,000. It is weird. Like I spent, I don't know, 4 years? Yeah, about 4 years to get to $100,000 spent in mobile games. And then in my 5th year, I'm at $150,000. Hey, yo, that is accelerating quickly. Check the card in the end screen if you want to see more information. GG.